Welcome to Operation Freedom, a show for and about veterans here in Prince William County and the Northern Virginia area. Our very special guest today is Mr. Thomas Hall, Rear Admiral, correct?
Yes.
Retired, and retired or former Assistant
Defense, yes.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for coming to our show.
Well, it's a delight to be here. It's a rainy day outside, but it's nice in here.
That's okay. You're a former Navy man. You
Oh,
can
I
handle it.
like that rain.
The way we normally discuss and talk about a service person that comes in is a little bit about your background. So can you grew up and where you're from?
Well, I'm a part Cherokee Indian from a little town called Barnsdall, Oklahoma, just north of Tulsa. I was born there and had about 1,800 people. It's down to 1,200 now. So I'm from truly the Midwest. And you know, there's people. The biggest thing I'd seen was a creek or a pond, and people said, why in the world did you go? I'd never seen the ocean. There seems to be an attraction for a lot of Central America to join the Navy.
Well, when you were going through school, did you have much interaction with military people, military persons?
Yes. I remember this, that we were out on the porch, and I was with my mother, and an airplane flew over, and I said, Mom, I want to do that. And she said, well, son, you can do anything you want. We don't have money to send you to college. We were, I guess, a poor family. We had plenty to eat, but that time there were many World War II veterans. Almost everybody had served. There'd been a draft. So the 4th of July celebration, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, always big celebrations in a little town, and expected for the draft to continue. It didn't, but they sort of expected you to go in. And I remember many times they'd say, son, you're going to join which service? So I had a lot of contact. My father and no one in my family, however, had gone, but I knew many veterans.
High school, you were already thinking military service.
I was thinking military service, but what I was thinking is I heard about the Naval Academy, heard about West Point, and of course later on the new Air Force Academy, and I knew that they would pay for your education. What I didn't know is that you had to serve, which is good, but with no money, I knew that it was going to be very tough, and I had to start very young working. I used to say I've never seen a job I wouldn't do. I would cut any lawn, work anywhere, save money. And I worked, I played all sports and did those things in school, cleaning a bank in the middle of the night. Sometimes I would finish getting back from trips and all and clean it just before they got in. But I was able to put together $1,000. Now this is 1958, I graduated. And to go to Oklahoma State University, it took $1,000. I went and I applied for the academies in high school, but they told me I didn't have the proper background. It was a small school, and I didn't have the proper math and science background. But at the end of the first year, I was out of airspeed, altitude, and ideas, as we say in aviation. You have to quit school and start working and then go to school, but an appointment came through to the Naval Academy, and so I was very fortunate to get that.
All right, so in high school, which you graduated in 58, you had that plan, or at least some
I had the
semblance
plan.
of a plan. So you went to Oklahoma State and successful in your application process to the academy.
I did. I worked very hard in engineering and had very, very high grades, despite the fact that when I got out of high school, they told me I probably couldn't do college work. And so I submitted my work there. There was one problem. $100 to get in the academy, and that was a down deposit for your uniforms and things.
Really?
Because officers have to, of course, buy all their uniforms and don't get them, which is fair, and you needed to get there. So I had neither $300 or a way to get there. So I went down to the local wax refinery, the world's largest wax refinery, right in the middle of Oklahoma, and I asked the boss if I could have a job. And he said, he knew me very well, I'd worked there before, and he said, well, you have to work all 3 months in the summer, that's the contract However, if at the end of 1 month for some pressing reason you had to quit, we would understand it. I said, yes, sir. And I said, I need to get $300, enough money to buy a ticket to get there. And he said, you know, Tom, we have a job that pays just that much. And he really didn't. He helped me and paid just the amount. And so I got my ticket, got my suitcase. I never really been out of Oklahoma except one time, never seen the ocean, and started on a train back to the Naval Academy. I didn't know where Annapolis was.
Right.
I got Maryland, near D.C. I almost made it, and then I ran out of money, and I had no way to get there. So I started walking from Washington, D.C. to Annapolis. That's a good distance over there, and 18-wheeler came by. And in those days, they would pick up hitchhikers, and he said, get in here, son, where are you going? I said, well, I'll get you over there. We got to Annapolis, and he pulled over, and he said, now, 3.8 miles up West Street is the Naval Academy. You turn and walk up that way. So I got out of an 18-wheeler, took my cardboard suitcase, literally, and walked 3.8 miles. I got there, and they said, what do you want us to do with your suitcase? And I said, well, give it to somebody poorer than me or burn it. I don't have anything else. I had this money, though, that I didn't spend. I ran out of money, so I didn't spend it to eat any food.
Right.
So I just went without food because it's $300. I gave him the $300, me a chance. And you know, that was the beginning of my understanding this is the greatest country in the world. If you want to work and if you want to try, there's going to be something to help you achieve that goal and that dream you have.
So when you stepped through that portal, or that, I realized you got on the grounds and stuff, did you, what opportunities, what you were looking for at that time in your life?
I had no idea. My classmates and others they had a program they could visit the academy in the summer. You could get some preparatory books. And in fact, when I was on the train, while I still had somebody ride on the train, there were a number of young, I tell for no reason except I think it's important for young people to listen to it. They had nice suits on and all were going down. I had on, clean clothes, but they weren't very nice. And they saw me, and I asked them, are you going to the academy? And they said, yes. And they said, have you ever been there? And I said, no. And they said, you've never been there? Their summer program? No. And they said, have you memorized this? And it was called Reef Points. It was a book. And you're supposed to have memorized this stuff in here before you get to the academy. And towards the end, they got off and they said, it's really been nice knowing you. We know you can make it there. And that's what they left me with, is they got a taxi and went on, and I stayed there. 4 years later, none of the three of them were there, and I was still there. And I only say that in a not bragging way, because I really wanted it. I had nothing else. It's sort of like in that Officer and the Gentleman. I've got nothing else. And times were pretty tough, and there was a lot of physical activity and stuff, and a couple of people said, we're just going to run you out of here to find out what you're made of. And I said, well, you'll have to carry me out feet first dead, because I got nothing else. And so out, but it was a wonderful institution. I'm very proud I went there, but most people arrived in a little better fashion than I did, but I don't think that makes any difference. I really wanted it.
Yeah, the attitude that you obviously exude, that from my knowing you, obviously separates you from a whole lot of other people. The positive outlook, the achievement that just oozes from you is pretty clear, and I guess that has its roots back in those times where the academy started to grow that even more so. Is that a fair statement?
It is, and really have three goals even before I got out of high school. Number one is I wanted to go to college and graduate. No one in my family had. My father and mother went to the 6th grade and then had to go to work. I wanted to become a pilot, and I wanted to serve my country. Those are I was able to do all of that. And again, I hearken back, what a great country. It allowed me to do that. But those are my goals coming out of Oklahoma.
So let's fast forward a little bit. When did you graduate from the academy?
I graduated in 1963.
Okay. At that point, what choices did you have in aviation? Did they say, sure, you can go here, 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 or did they say, this is what you got, this is the path you're going?
No, and it's another message that I would have for the young people out there, and I hope they have a chance to see that because they're our future, and I talk to them a lot. And standing, we had, I think, 1,200 enter the academy. We had 892 left at the end of the time, and we were ranked from number 1 right down to number 892. And it was on class standing, which is made up of academics, physical are all put together, and you get class standing. So for the people that say, oh, I don't have to try, don't worry about class standing, it really counted there. So on the night of service selection, they got up and read the name of the number 1 person, and that person went down and chose which they were going into. Now they had to be physically qualified to fly, and had to see you and interview you. But beside those, and I think we were allowed 100 Marines out of the class. So they picked theirs, and they went right down till they got to, number 92. Me, and I wanted aviation. But that's how it was very, very much of how you had performed there.
And in the aviation field, were you able to select the type of flight that you wanted, or was that an option?
Well, it's very good. You're very good at those. You've done this before, I can tell. And I went down to Pensacola and started our flight training. And once again, you begin accumulating in academics how you could fly. And then when it came time, they went by class standing. And there we had 50 people, and there I stood a little higher. I stood number 1 of 50, so I got my choice. And I didn't want to fly fighters and do that thing. A lot of my classmates did. It's exciting to go 2,000 miles an hour and look like Top Gun and all that. And I really, they do a great job, and I admire them. Anybody that come aboard a carrier at night, I admire. I did day quals, but not at night. But the P3 Orion was just coming in. They had River, and of course it's a 4-engine and a submarine warfare airplane made from the Electra. And I knew about this. You have a 13-man person crew, and you could right away get your own airplane, your own crew, and be in charge. And it really appealed to me. Plus the teamwork. I've always liked a sports person. I'm a team person, so I thought, gee, I can have these people. So I selected that. They had 1 seat. And I got that, and I went to Pax River. And so I flew the airplane for 31 years, about 7,000 hours, and probably had more hours than any P3 pilot when I left the Navy. But and just recently the P8's coming in, so I see an entire generation turning over. And I talk to the people going to the first P8 squadron and say, I'll pass the baton to you because I went to the very first one. And of course the Cold War was a lot about Soviet submarines and that, and it turned out to be everything that I could have wanted. I really enjoyed flying it.
Let's back up a little bit. Most folks don't even know how to spell P3. Okay, could you just went through it very quickly.
Yes.
Can you explain the platform, what type of bird, all the things that it can do roughly, land-based craft?
Yeah, the Navy, is probably identifies everything by acronyms and all this. A P is a patrol, and the 3 is just merely the model. Right. And they have fighters, F, so it's attack, A on it and all. But the P3 Orion is a 4-engine, Allison engines, 4 Hamilton Standard propellers, and it's 116 feet 9 inches long, 33 feet 9 inches high, and it's made to carry with all the electronic equipment 13 people. So it's a long-range airplane in Vietnam, a 16.7-hour mission, and had to go into Da Nang to get some fuel because we had about run out of fuel. So it's very long. Typically, you can fly an 8 to 10-hour mission, and in Vietnam, every 3rd day we flew a 12-hour mission for 7 months every 3rd day. Got a little bit of time off, but it's a tremendous airplane for operating in all climates. I operated in Iceland a long time out of it. It's got differential reversing, very easy to control, and a great airplane. So that's the size of it.
Very good. That's very helpful because a lot of people don't know. So were assigned to? You've talked Vietnam, Iceland, where else?
Well, my first real experience was in Vietnam, and we were deployed doing 6 months of deployed operations when we got the word that we were going to Vietnam. They had been using West Coast squadrons to fly, and they were getting very tired and need some help. So we were the first East Coast squadron pulled out and flew across the U.S., stopped, got some fuel, flew to Hawaii, got some fuel, flew to Guam. So we actually operated out of the Philippines. We did operate in country out of Saigon and Da Nang and Cam Ranh Bay, and then out of Thailand. And our job, people would say, well, that's kind of funny, were there any submarines? And there were no submarines in Vietnam, but they tailored the airplane. It was very flexible, and we went out on these missions, the 4 carriers that were launching Alpha Strikes and all into Vietnam. The other thing we did is patrol the coastline because the Viet Cong at that time we'd interdicted their lines of communication so that they started bringing in guns by there and junks. And so we would go along and light them up with a searchlight and call the SEALs in, and then the SEALs would come and take care of them. And so they were getting aboard. So that's what we did most of the time, one of those 2 type missions.
Because you have a very long career, but let me just briefly ask you, during this time of being when you're deployed, covering during the Vietnam time, anything particularly, one instance, an incident or something that really stands out in your mind that occurred?
Well, we went in 1966, and we were there for 7 months up through the time. And our very first mission that we were going to fly, I was a young pilot lieutenant, and the operations boss was a commander and very senior, and he said, we're going to fly the first combat mission into Vietnam, get the crew ready, because he could do that. So I got loaded up our 13. We had 4 2,000-pound bombs in the bomb bay. We had rockets on the wings. We had flares. We had everything there. We were loaded to bear. And so we took off, and we lifted off the runway, and we were really loaded right at the end. We rotated, missed the seawall, got up, and somebody said, we're on fire. The aircraft's on fire. We have smoke. We don't know what's going on. So he said, well, let's go back and turn, and came back, and now we're at Max Gross. Wait. He said, have you ever landed an airplane at Max Gross weight, this kind? And I said, I'm only a lieutenant. I'm a JG. I don't know. And he said, well, I've never landed this heavy either. So we, by this time, and we forgot, it shows you how it can happen, to jettison all of our ordnance.
Right.
We forgot it. And they came up and said, we've got smoke everywhere. Overcome with smoke, and by this time it was rolling into the cockpit. So he said, well, take out the hatches on the side, and there's a way you can take the hatches out, and that started venting some of it. So we came around and landed, and he made a terrific landing. And then the first thing he said is, shut down all 4 engines and pull the 4 handles, abandon the aircraft, and 13 of us ran across. Now, on the ramp, because we were the first one, they had a band. They had the Commodore, they had the whole squadron there assembled there, and we came running, and they came running towards us and said, what happened? And we told him, and he said, man, we're taking it and we're going. So we had a ready alert aircraft, fueled, loaded, all the stuff in it. So we got on the ready alert aircraft and tried it again. Got the band out there, everything going. We took off, and this time we made it okay. We got up over a town called Lubang. I'll never forget. And he got out of the seat, and another person got in his seat, and he sat down, strapped in, and somebody said, we're on fire. There's a flare burning through the wing into the gasoline out in the wing. And so this time we said jettison. Nothing except the one that was burning. And it had popped a parachute behind it, and just enough to pull it. All the rest was hung ordnance. So now we had hung ordnance on, and we got the one off, and we turned around, came back, went through the whole thing, landed, got out, and we said, we're not going to take a 3rd airplane. We're not going to try it. That was the very first mission we tried, and it's burned in my memory just like I can see it right now.
Wow. Wow. Well, as a former EOD guy, I'm thinking all that ordnance and
You know, you got to jettison it and all. And we just,
you
we,
did.
you know, I guess in the, you know, we were worried about landing, getting the airplane in there as our first mission, and we weren't used to flying peacetime missions fully loaded with all the bombs and stuff.
That's a good. I like that.
But
one.
you learn, you know, if it isn't too big a price, you really learn from making mistakes. And all of us have been in have, and I'm sure in your EOD time you have. You know, if you survive and everything's okay, you never do that again.
That's a big plus.
It's a big plus. You never do it again.
So you served your time in Nam, and then where did you go after that?
I had a fairly typical tour. After that, I went back to the Naval Academy to be a company officer. And a company officer, we had 120 or so midshipmen divided in you know, each one of us. And we looked after them, their grades. We called their parents. We you know, took care of them. And I liked. When I was at the Naval Academy, I had a very good company officer. He was a Marine, and I thought this would be a good place to serve. And so I asked to go back there. My career monitor said, "Oh, don't go back there. You know, that's not a good place to go." And I said, "Well, I think it is." And I went back there and had the time there. Right after that, I went right back to the squadron flying. They told me I did very well there. I could have what I wanted. And did I want to go flying or go on board ship? I said, "No, I want to go flying." And so I went into a squadron tour, and then came back to Washington. I ended up having 3 tours in Washington and the Pentagon, and people say, you know, that's very tough, and it is very tough. So I did that along the way, and went back and commanded the squadron. I commanded the squadron, which was my first one, VP-8, and I had fortunate enough to get assigned back to the first squadron, and it was really very nice going back to the first squadron you came from.
I can imagine that was a huge difference of your thinking, your perception, what you know now versus what you knew then when you walk in. It's just a brand new. Let me take you back when you went back to the academy and you were working there. Did you see other young men like yourself walking in the door?
Yes, I did. There were no women going at the time. They are now. It's a good thing. But it was all male, and I could see them there, and I could see the ones hungry. I remember one in particular, and he's still in this area, and he knows that. He was really gifted. He was a former Marine, had been a Marine 3 years, as enlisted before he came in to the academy.
Right.
He immediately became the leader and became battalion commander, but he was, I had to call him in one time, and I said, "Come on in here." I won't say his name. And I said, "There are going to be 1 or 2 things happen to you. You've got to stop charging so hard. You've got to stop doing these things. You're charging and doing all these things, and I know what they are." And I said, "You're either going to be kicked out or you're going to be a general." General today.
That's a heck of an option to tell a young man like that.
And he looked at me and said, "Yes, sir, yes, sir." But if he were looking at this tape, he'll remember. He's a 3-star general. But I said, 1 or 2 things are going to happen. You're charging hard. Now you've got to stop doing these things, you know. And he did. They weren't bad things. He was just, you know, the kind of things that young people do. But I could see it in him. I could see that fire in him, and his classmates followed him.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to follow him in a good way, you know. They had, I'm not saying he did this, but they had things where you would go over the wall, hiding and come back and, you know, escape for a little liberty,
Right.
things like that. They were very, you know, but that young man, who's not so young now, but he took the option of being a 3-star Marine general.
Well, good. That's good to hear. But you're right. The young men and women, when they're in that phase or stage of life, you have the opportunity to give guidance exactly at that point in their lives where they need it. Because they could be out on the street doing X, Y, Z, but no, they're here serving their country, and you want them to grow down that life path for themselves and for the benefit of our nation.
We had, it was really a very enjoyable time, and my wife was very involved. We had all of the midshipmen over for dinner so they could see how a typical lieutenant lived. And then there were a number of them engaged, and we had them bring their fiancés over, and they would talk to my wife, and we'd try to give advice and counsel. We've been along the way, and so let them to see what we're doing. And we thought that was part of our job, to pass on things. And I used to tell them about my mistakes. And I said, look, I know what you're doing now. I've been a midshipman. I know what's going on. And I would talk to them about it, and it humanized it a little bit. And they thought, well, and we still meet with them when they have their reunions, and it's very good to meet with that one first class we had.
That's very, very interesting and exciting. And we do want to hear more about it. Perhaps, as we unfortunately have to end this show,
Yes.
in the future, you'll be able to come back. And I want to hear more about the rest of your career, because you have served our country for, I believe, at least
50 years.
50 years. There's much more to you, much more for our viewers, and thank you for participating in this part of this interview.
Well, I'd like to do that. Thank you for having me.
We will have you back whenever you desire. I'm your host, Steve Botello. I want to thank you all for watching our show, and I want to thank the Admiral here for taking the time to come speak to you. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your service, sir.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
No problem.